Principle 5. You can judge the wisdom of any society by the investment it makes in its children. It was back in the 1980s, my wife and I, with a lot of help from friends, had just set up a safe house to provide accommodation for young people who'd been rejected or exploited by those who should have loved and cared for them. But as the house filled with 17, 18 and 19-year-olds, I was in for a shock, a very big shock. There was rarely a please, a thank you, a smile, or even eye contact from any of our residents. And that's not all. To make the house a home, we'd kitted it out with wonderful artwork. We'd been careful about the colours and a huge TV set that I had personally bought to put in the lounge. Yet soon after our residents arrived, everything disappeared. I mean, everything. It was all stolen and sold by the very young people we had worked so hard to create an oasis for. I was angry. I'm not proud of it now, but I was very angry. What was wrong with these people? The problem, however, as I slowly realised, wasn't theirs, it was mine. I slowly understood that if these wounds, if these young people had been wounded because they had broken arms or disfigured limbs, I would have readily compensated for them. I would have opened doors for them. But because their wounds were psychological, emotional, and internal, born out of neglect or abandonment, fear, abuse, rejection. At first, the truth is I didn't even recognise they were wounds at all. The old world binary thinking around morality would describe these dysregulated and traumatised children, young people and adults as selfish and morally flawed. It's always too easy to assume, for instance, that all violence, all bad behaviour is a selfish, immoral, outrageous act of personal power and defiance, and that punishment is the best way, the most meaningful way of correcting the problem. The problem is that none of that thinking is correct. The reality of the young people that I was working with was that all were victims of circumstance, and as a result, they'd appropriately adapted to the dysfunctional world that they'd been forced to live in, they'd been forced to endure. They didn't decide to explode, they didn't decide to be rude, but their capacity to manage their emotions was limited. And the same is true for countless thousands of young people today. Something triggers them. They're spun out of control. And only after the whirlwind has passed can they ever regain a sense of awareness and realise the gravity of the thing that they've done. Our assumption is that children are all born with resilience built in, and that they should have good manners. Don't worry, we say, if things go wrong for them. They're kids, they'll bounce back, they'll be okay, they'll be fine. They're only young, they'll get over it. The problem is this: children aren't resilient. Their brains are plastic. They absorb what's going on around them, and their brains can be shaped well or disfigured by the pain, by the rejection, by the abuse, by the violence that goes on around them. All this means that if we're going to make any real progress in our support of individual children and families at a micro level, we've got to recognise and grapple with the fact that trauma-creating bias is often in our systems. And what we need, therefore, is a whole society, a whole community level response to that. Our systems, all of them, and our communities need to be truly trauma-informed. For instance, that means that not only do they need to notice young people who can't self-regulate and work with them, punishment never helps anyone. I'm never healed by being harmed. I'm never healed by being shouted at and put down. Instead, I need to be seen and heard and understood and loved. And I'm telling you that in that first hostel Oasis ran, slowly, even someone as slow as I worked that out. But our communities are also traumatized by racism. They're traumatized by Islamophobia, by homophobia, by transphobia, by gender inequality, and by the marginalization of those who are atypical learners, those who are neurodiverse, those who live with the impact of disability. That's why the reform of our communities, our welfare and social systems is so essential. As we work to bring an end to policies and methods of working which either implicitly or explicitly carry with them prejudice and bias and put down. It's our task to do things differently.